Good morning. My name is Basha Landry, and I'm interviewing Miss Decatur, Miss Professor Decatur. And she's a graduate of Texas Southern. I'm going to talk about her personal experience and the importance of a HBCU. My first question today will be, what made you choose Texas Southern?
I started out at TSU at a very early age, just visiting the campus and doing different programs on the campus. My parents, so I was born and raised in Houston, and I grew up on the south side of Houston. When I was probably in middle school, my mom wanted to enroll me in some type of college prep program, and TSU had a science and technology prep program that Dr. Etta Walker was running here at TSU. And so I enrolled in that program when I was in middle school. So I already was kind of building a relationship with the school and the staff here and the professors here. And I just always felt comfortable after that. So when I graduated, I had a lot of scholarship offers to go to a lot of different places. I ended up getting a full scholarship to U of H, and I wanted to stay in town and stay close to my family, so I chose U of H. And I ended up not enjoying the experience at all. I missed the care and the closeness that I experienced at TSU and even throughout my schooling in my community because I always went to community schools. Um, and U of H was just too big and too impersonal. And as a black student, I just didn't really feel like there was a space for me at the time. Now, this was back in the 90s. So I'm sure U of H has is much more diverse now and has more programs in place to help students, like me, who are coming in now. So I transferred to TSU my sophomore year, and the reason that I came to TSU was because I was one of those students who knew I needed a smaller campus, a smaller community. I needed to have personal relationships with my professors. I needed to feel like my professors were invested in my success, and I felt like I could get that at TSU.
What was your major and why did you choose it?
So I majored in English and I minored in history. And the reason for that is because I've always I've always been fascinated with English, the history of the language. I've always enjoyed writing creatively and academically. I always did very well in English as a subject when I was studying throughout school and through high school, even. And so I wanted to major in English for that reason. And I minored in history because I also was very fascinated with history. From early civilization all the way through, um, the civil rights movement, the 80s, that era, the Reagan era. I was all very fascinated with all of that. And that's why I chose those subject areas as a major and a minor.
Okay. What are some of your first impressions of Texas Southern University when you arrived?
I felt like I was home. Like back in the 90s when you came to TSU, it was really, I'm trying to think of the proper way to say this. It was just really black. And I've always really loved, black culture. And so I felt very at home. Like you had your, the Greek life, and you would see all of the Greek organizations out and about and moving around campus. You had your student government, you had your African American Studies um, organizations, all of these different things going on campus that really celebrated um, black culture and the black experience. And so I was very excited about that. Just being able to, be around people again after leaving U of H who look like me and who had similar experiences with me, and that made me feel very like at ease and at home.
Do you think HBCUs are still needed and important?
I think HBCUs are definitely still needed and are still important because the mission of HBCUs is still needed and still important. You know, HBCUs were developed and built because Black people did not have access to the same educational opportunities as whites. Back then, it was during a time of segregation and Jim Crow and so forth. And although today we have integrated, statistics and studies show that there are still many inequalities that are a result of this type of institutional structural racism. And because that is still the case, there still needs to be a place where the focus on educating Black people still needs to be a priority. So I think it is still important that HBCUs exist. Although, there's nothing wrong with going to a predominantly white institution. But we're seeing right now in the news with PWIs all across the nation who are having all kinds of, civil disobedience and movements because of the lack of inclusion, because of the way that they are ostracized and treated as students on that campus. And not to say that an HBCU doesn't have its own set of problems or issues, but we're basically still seeing issues at hand at predominantly white universities and institutions that are the reason that HBCUs were founded in the first place, and therefore, there still needs to be a continuation of that legacy of HBCUs.
What advice would you give incoming freshmen who are attending TSU?
What advice would I give incoming freshmen? I would tell incoming freshmen, in the way that I do with all of my students, the college experience is as much a social experience as it is an educational experience. It's difficult to find a balance between the two, but it's important to experience both sides. So it's a culturally rich experience. You can build relationships here that will follow you through life and change your life. There is a focus on you as an individual student. Here at TSU, there is a strong, beautiful legacy of the university. And so I would say that, and soak all of that in. Enjoy the social aspect, the partying, the hanging out, the meeting new people. All of that is a part of the experience, and it's a part of the experience that you will look back on when you're an adult and appreciate that you had access to. So that's important to experience, but it's also important not to get completely engulfed in the social aspect and forget that the reason that you're here is to receive an education and learn how to put yourself in the position to receive the best education that you can.
Why is it important for students to know the history and legacy of TSU?
I think that it's important for students to understand the history and legacy of TSU because it is a legacy of love. It is a legacy of a deep care for not only those attending TSU, but the community as a whole. TSU was started very modestly. Classes were actually being taught at Yates High School before, we actually had a building on the campus. Right now, my office, which is in the Fairchild building, this is the first building that was built on the land that became TSU. So it's a beautiful a legacy, and a legacy that should remind students that, you know, TSU cared about Black students, you know, when no one else did. And it's important to go forward remembering that aspect of the legacy, and remembering that everyone who is here with that legacy in mind, the care and concern and love for, you know, this Black community that TSU is a part of, Third Ward, and also, um, you know, the school itself, and the many faces who have come through, some who have been famous and amazing, like Barbara Jordan and Mickey Leland, and you know, everyday regular folks, all of the attorneys and the pharmacists and the professors like me who TSU have produced. So it's important to know the legacy so that you can feel pride in the legacy and also want to continue the legacy when you leave.
Why did you decide to come back to Texas Southern and teach?
This is a question I have to answer for myself all the time when I have bad days as a professor. Why did I come back to TSU? I think I wanted to come back to TSU and because I wanted to serve. I wanted to serve Third Ward as a community. I do a lot of work in activism in the community, a lot of projects in the community. I work with a lot of artists in the community. And I became conscious and politically active and learned about history and roots and legacy at TSU. But I also was nurtured in a great way at TSU by the faculty and staff here. And I feel like that nurturing and that care and that desire for me to be successful really impacted my life and has made me a success in many ways. You know, I do a lot of things outside teaching here at TSU. And so I wanted to kind of send that on and pass it on and pay it forward, I guess. Because I know how important it was to be here for me. And I want to also help to make that experience available to students who come to TSU, to have that professor who is interested, invested in their success, and who loves them and believes that they are capable of achieving anything that they want, and giving them the tools to do that reach far beyond any subject that they might be studying, you know. And that is why I came back.
Thank you for your time and allowing me to interview today.
You're welcome. That's it.